"Hello, Adelaide," I said to the little girl sitting in the waiting room, reaching out my hand to her. "Are you ready?" Adelaide stood up and grabbed my outstretched hand, looking back at her mother for reassurance. "It's okay, honey," her mother said. "Dr. Morgan's here to help you. Go and talk to him, and I'll be waiting for you right here when you get done, I promise." Adelaide stood there staring at her mother, unsure of what to do until I gave a gentle tug of her arm. "Come with me," I said, leading her into my office. "I really think you're going to like it in here. All the kids do." I heard her gasp as I released her hand to shut the door behind us. This was the reaction most kids had when they saw the way my office was decorated. The room looked more like a colorful toy store than it did a doctor's office. I watched her walk over to the corner where the stuffed animals were gathered together in a huge pile. She reached out to pick one up, but stopped, looking back at me to make sure it was okay. "You can play with anything in here," I said. "Except for the things on my desk," I pointed. "I need those things to do my job." Adelaide picked up a stuffed unicorn and sat on the floor with it in her lap. While she pretended to groom the stuffed animal's mane, I grabbed a few sheets of paper and a box full of broken crayons from one of the desk drawers. Walking over to where Adelaide was, I sat down on the floor next to her, putting the paper and crayons in front of her. "Do you think I can get you to draw me a picture?" I asked. She hugged the unicorn close to her body and shook her head, emphatically. "Why not?" I asked. She turned her head away from me and focused her attention on the unicorn. When it was clear she wasn't going to answer, I decided to ask a more pointed question. "Is it because of the paper man?" She turned her head to look at me, her brow furrowed, wondering how I knew about the paper man. "Your mom told me that you think that paper man took your dad away. Can you tell me what happened?" Adelaide shook her head. "You won't believe me either," she said. "You might be surprised by what I believe," I said. Reaching into my purse, which was hanging on the chair beside my desk, I pulled out an old photo and handed it to Adelaide. "What do you see?" I asked. She looked at the photo for a second before trying to hand it back to me. "It's just an open closet door," she replied. "Look closer," I said, pushing the photo back towards her. She held the photo close to her face, scouring every detail. When she finally saw it was hidden in the closet, she dropped the photo, letting it flutter to the floor. "What is that?" she whispered. "For lack of a better term, that is the monster in my closet." I picked up the photo, glanced at it, and put it back in my purse. Even after all these years, the image of those disembodied eyes staring back at me from the closet gave me chills. "There is a monster in your closet?" From the tone of her voice, I could tell she was starting to trust me. "There was," I replied. "Back when I was your age." "What happened to it?" "I don't know. We moved the day after I took that photo." "Because of the monster?" "No, not because of the monster," I said. "I actually didn't know there was a monster there until years later when I was going through my photos. What about you? When did you first notice the paper man?" Seemed like the perfect moment to steer the conversation back towards Adelaide. She got really quiet and didn't move a muscle. I thought I had misread her and that she had retreated into her thoughts again. But then she said, "About a year." "Can you remember the first time you saw him?" She nodded her head but remained silent. "It's okay, Adelaide. I believe the paper man is real. Here to help you get rid of him." I placed my hand on her shoulder. "Promise?" I could hear the desperation in her voice. "I promise," I replied, holding out my pinky for a pinky swear. She gave a thin-lipped smile and hooked her pinky around mine. "Now tell me everything you remember." "I was at school," Adelaide began, looking down at the unicorn as she collected her thoughts. "I was in the nurse's office because Billy Cabler pushed me down and made me skin my knee." "Billy Cabler," I interrupted her. "Why does that name sound familiar?" Adelaide began to cry. I reached back into my purse, this time pulling out my phone. I entered the name, Billy Cabler, into the search bar of my internet browser. Several headlines popped up, reminding me why the name was so familiar. "So Billy went missing the first time you saw the paper man, didn't he?" I asked in a calm voice, placing my arm around Adelaide, pulling her close. She began to sob even harder, but I could feel her nod her head against my chest. It's my fault. He's gone. Each word came out as a heavy sob. It's not your fault, I said, removing my arm from her shoulder and using my hand to lift her chin so that she was looking at me. You are not responsible for what the paper man does. I held her for several minutes and kept repeating that it was not her fault. But he took Billy and my dad because I drew pictures of them, Adelaide said, when she had calmed down. How can that not be my fault? Because I know what the paperman is, and what he's capable of doing. You only drew those pictures because the paperman manipulated your anger, driving you to pick up those crayons and give form to the thoughts that he was putting inside your head. He's just a parasite, feeding off your emotions. You're lying, Adelaide said, her eyes narrowing in anger as her demeanor suddenly changed. You don't really believe me. You're just pretending to like me. I bet that photo you showed me isn't even real. I knew the reason for the sudden outburst, because the paperman had finally had enough and was ready to put an end to this conversation. He was inciting her to take action against me. Maybe I'm lying, I said, trying to fuel her anger further. Maybe you should draw my picture, I suggested, pushing the paper and box of crayons towards her. Maybe I will, she said, grabbing a crayon and beginning to draw. I didn't try to stop her. Instead, I got up and walked over to my desk and retrieved something from one of the drawers. When she finished the picture, she looked down in horror at what she'd drawn. She picked up the drawing intending to tear it up, but I stopped her. Don't do that, I said, holding out my hand. I needed you to draw that picture. It's the only way we're going to be able to stop him. How? She said, beginning to cry again. I'll tell you when the time is right. For now, don't let go of that picture. As soon as I finished speaking, the room grew cold and lost its color. I knew what that meant. Something was crossing dimensions. He's coming, Adelaide said, pointing at the wall. When the paperman appeared, he looked like an enormous stick figure drawn on the wall with a giant black crayon. Watching him reach out and pull himself free from the two-dimensional surface of the wall was like watching a cartoon character climb out of a TV. Once he was free, he made his way towards me, a crudely drawn knife clutched in his hand. When he appeared on the wall, he also appeared in the picture Adelaide had drawn. Every step that brought him closer to me in the real world also brought him closer to me in the drawing. If he got a hold of me, that piece of paper would become my grave. Erase him! I yelled, tossing the bottle of whiteout I had grabbed from my desk to Adelaide. The paperman looked over at Adelaide, then back to me, weighing his options. He decided to go after Adelaide, knowing she now posed a bigger threat to him. I jumped in front of the paperman as he turned towards Adelaide. I'm the one you want, I said, holding on my arms to prevent him from getting past me. He knocked me aside with a swipe of his arm. In an act of desperation, I reached out and grabbed hold of the paperman's legs. I regretted the decision the moment my hands closed around his ankles. Touching him made me feel incredibly uncomfortable. I had to fight the urge to let go of his leg, knowing if I did, he'd take Adelaide instead of me. Hurry up, I yelled. I can't hold him much longer. Watching her fumble with the cap of the whiteout was like watching her in slow motion. It seemed to take forever. When she started to dip the brush into the bottle, I couldn't take it any longer. Just pour it on the picture, I said. The paperman's hands inches away from latching onto her. If she had been a few seconds slower in responding, he would have grabbed her. Thankfully, she managed to upend the bottle and pour it over the image of the paperman that was on her drawing. As the whiteout flowed over his picture, he began to vanish from the real world. Make sure nothing remains of him, I said, or we'll have to do this all over again. A few minutes later, after Adelaide and I composed ourselves, we walked back out into the waiting room where her mother was reading a magazine. How'd it go? She asked, setting the magazine back on the table. It went great, I replied, looking down at Adelaide. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah, Adelaide agreed. Great. Do I need to make another appointment? Her mother asked. I don't think that'll be necessary, I said. But you have my number, if anything comes up. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video. or listening to tonight's podcast on the podcast, if you're listening to that there at Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you could happen to listen to podcasts. Also, I just want to take a quick second to tell you guys about HorrorConVR. HorrorConVR is actually a horror convention that I'm putting together with a group of my friends who are YouTube horror creators and other horror creators and just sometimes VRChat creators and things like that. You can find out more at HorrorConVR.com or follow us on Twitter at horror_VR. It's going to be hosted on VRChat in October, and the best part is you do not need a VR headset to be able to join and play. So check out those places, join us on Discord, and we do meetups every Saturday, which is fun. And of course, I wanted to give a big thank you to everyone who checks out patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta and supports the show, keeps the light on, gives me treats for my now 2 cats, both Hylas and Hercules. Both of them are a handful. And especially a big thank you to Saha, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Mazikeen, Ken Lando Higuchi, Chompski, Nico kaeo, Tristain Pelton, Stephen VanHuss, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, G. Weevil 3, TheRedOakShieldVirus, Hades' Nephew, Carter Barenfanger, Dr. Strawberry, Jordan Wayne Deckard, Bradney Leipe, The Government Monitoring System, Ann Charron, rumblefox, AcidSystem, Mike Bullock, Rafael Rodriguez, Dan Sweet, Mad Marstomp, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Sean Mills, Brian Arce, Cryptic Nightmares, Shadow Morningstar, Somber Puppet, Brianna Wright, Someone You Love, Said the King 56, Bad Honey, S-Man, Kiri the Sloth, Patrick Schoolmeister, Thomas Burgett, Barbara Maceo, Bobby Carmen, Liam Newman, The Homeless Bird 93, Sky Harbor, Caleb Dougal, Last Blade Song, Eliminator 86, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, and Corey X Kenshin. A big thank you to all of you guys and everybody down there in the description. I really can't thank you guys enough for supporting the show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And everybody who listens, sweet dreams.